racing is commonplace today, we owe our thanks to this racing series for its invention. By late 1972, Roger Penske's racing team was only 6 years old, but had already made a big splash in the motorsports world. They had won a huge variety of races and championships: IndyCar with the Indy 500, endurance racing with the 24 Hours of Daytona, Can-Am, Trans Am, and NASCAR. If it was a form of high-level racing that happened in the United States, Penske Racing had not only participated, but had won. With his fingers in so many different pies, Penske was uniquely positioned to answer a question that motorsports enthusiasts often ask: what kind of racing produces the fastest drivers? The first ever International Race of Champions, or IROC, tried to answer this question. The premise was simple: put a dozen of the world's best drivers from all different kinds of racing in identical cars and see what happens. Penske ordered 15 specially prepared Porsche Carrera RSRs to do just that and created a series of races for them to participate in. In the process, he created a motorsports icon. While the premise of IROC was simple, it needed a lot of planning to execute well. Where would the races happen and at what tracks? Who would the 12 drivers be and what kind of cars would they race? Who would pay for it all? Roger Penske had been a racing driver himself, but hung up his helmet in 1965 and started building both a business empire and a racing team, starting with the purchase of a Chevrolet dealer outside of Philadelphia in 1966. The discipline with which he ran his business and his racing ensured that success came to both, and he understood that IROC needed to be run the same way. To accomplish this, he partnered with two men: Les Richter, a former NFL player who was president and general manager of Riverside International Raceway, and Michael Phelps, a Los Angeles talent agent who was well connected in the TV broadcast industry. Together, the three of them put together the first International Race of Champions in about a year. Penske would get the cars and take care of their logistics, Richter would handle the racetrack, sanctioning, and drivers, and Phelps would be responsible for sponsorship, financial negotiations, and the all-important TV contract needed to give the whole thing a shot at making a profit. His showbiz connections got ABC on board, who would broadcast the races in color on their famous Wide World of Sports program, where the event was dubbed the World Series of Racing. The money part was important because it ensured that the best drivers would show up, many of whom would be taking time out of their standard racing schedules to compete in the IROC races. Thus, a substantial purse of prize money was offered, for which they would all compete. It worked.
And this is the first time, in my opinion, that real show business has come into motor racing, Keith, and I think it's a great thing. We're really into a great series here.
The grid of 12 drivers had between them 2 F1 championships, 5 Can-Am championships, 6 Indy 500 wins, and 7 NASCAR Grand National championships. Getting a dozen of the world's best drivers who raced all around the world on track at the same time was a challenge, and so the first 3 races were held at Riverside International Raceway during the same weekend in late October of 1973. The top 6 finishers would compete in the championship race the following February at Daytona in Florida. The amount of TV exposure ensured that big sponsors would be interested in supporting the series. Goodyear signed on as the title sponsor, and tire supplier, of course, and they also paid for TV ads during the races and brought their blimp along for aerial shots too.
Today on Earth, Goodyear engineers use this advanced fiber to produce belts of X10. A revolutionary tire cord used in these special racing radials seen performing here at the International Race of Champions.
Union 76 and Champion also sponsored the series, supplying fuel and spark plugs respectively. Porsche was intimately involved too. Penske could have chosen any type of car for the IROC drivers, but the 911 made a lot of sense given what else Penske was up to at the time. In both 1972 and 73, Penske campaigned 1,000 horsepower plus Porsche 917s in Can-Am. His Can-Am drivers, Mark Donohue and George Follmer, also raced 911s in both the 24 Hours of Daytona and the 6 Hours of Watkins Glen in 1973. Porsche had spent tremendous effort developing the RSR, and it was the finest off-the-shelf race car that could be bought at the time. This wasn't accidental, of course. Porsche had a long history of making giant-beating race cars, ones that defeated cars with 2 or 3 times the cylinder count and displacement. This worked on many tracks, but at the 24 Hours of Le Mans it did not. So, Ferry Porsche's nephew, Ferdinand Piech, who was head of development, initiated a very costly clean-sheet race car project, the 12-cylinder 917. It did get Porsche its first and second Le Mans win, only to become ineligible to compete in Europe after 3 seasons due to rule changes. Ferry Porsche was famously frugal, so spending a huge sum of money on a race car with such a short competition life irritated him, and the directive for Porsche's racing team was clear for 1972. Find a cheaper way to go racing. The result was the Carrera RS, a hot-rodded street car 911 whose performance upgrades could be included in the race car version if at least 500 road cars were built. Porsche was initially worried that they couldn't sell 500 of them, but within a couple weeks of the car's debut, the required number had already been spoken for, and ultimately more than 3 times that many were built. Among these were 55 race cars, which carried the RSR designation. Compared to the standard road-going 2.7-liter Carrera RS, the RSRs had spicy 2.8-liter engines, wider wheels and tires with flares to go with, improved cooling, and quite a lot more. The RSR made its competition debut in spectacular style at the 24 Hours of Daytona in February of 1973, where it raced as a prototype because the homologation paperwork had not yet been completed. During the race, the specialized prototype cars all broke, so an RSR won outright, a feat that would be repeated later in 1973 at the 12 Hours of Sebring and the Targa Florio. The RSR went on to win the American Championship, the European Championship, and the World Championship in 1973. Porsche delivered RSRs in remarkably competitive form straight out of the box, which made them ideal for IROC's short timeline. The team already had their hands full putting the series together, and the last thing they needed was to build and develop a race car. The Porsches were fast, consistent, durable, and turnkey. They were powered by a development of the 3-liter engine, which had appeared partway through the 1973 season. The 15 IROC RSRs did have meaningful differences compared to the other 1974 RSRs, though. They had the flares and wheels from the 1973 cars. Other 1974 RSRs had wider flares and center-lock wheels to speed up tire changes, but these were not needed in IROC races because they were always shorter than 100 miles. IROC sent someone to Germany to oversee the development of the cars, all of which were tested by Porsche's motorsports department to ensure as little variation as possible between the cars in terms of grip, weight, and power output. A dozen were completed in time to be sent to California by sea, with the final 3 being late enough that they had to be flown over instead. Each car was painted a different color, so they could easily be distinguished while they raced, especially on TV, which was broadcast in color. As the first races approached in October of 1973, the cars were barely ready in time. As soon as the cars had arrived in the United States, they were shaken down on track, which uncovered some issues that required some frantic last-minute air freighting of spare engines and transaxles from Germany. The races occurred at Riverside International Raceway. Built in 1957, the circuit was a great spectator track which offered good visibility from numerous vantage points and a combination of tight technical sections and fast sweeping corners with plenty of opportunities for passing. There were 2 IROC races on Saturday the 27th of October and a single race on Sunday, after which the Can-Am race took place. All the cars were set up by the same team, and both drivers and cars were scrambled between each race to ensure no driver enjoyed a disproportionate advantage from being assigned a particularly strong car if there was one. It also disincentivized damaging the cars. Additionally, races 2 and 3 were gridded opposite to the finishing order of the previous race. The winner of one race would start at the back of the field in the next race. Unsurprisingly, the guys who had done 24-hour races in RSRs before were dominant. Mark Donohue won the first race in the white car, but failed to finish race 2 after experiencing throttle failure.
Screaming along through those curves at about 100 miles an hour, that's Mark Donohue in the pit. Mark Donohue, who started last, and a backup car is in the pit. So Mark Donohue is out of it.
During that race, his Penske teammate, George Follmer, driving this car, the black one, picked his way through the pack, got lucky with a few incidents near the front of the field, and managed a win.
And he's passed. George Follmer's got past him.
And David Pearson riding.
Donohue's DNF in race 2 ensured that he started in first place in race 3, a position he maintained for the duration of that race. During that race, he happened to drive this same black car in which Follmer had won the previous day, making this the only IROC RSR to win more than one race. This was a particularly remarkable achievement given that it was supposed to be a spare car but was pressed into service after issues with other cars appeared. Thus, Donohue won 2 of 3 IROC races at Riverside, and then later on Sunday afternoon he won the Can-Am race in a 9:17:30 as well. After Riverside, some of the IROC RSRs were sold off since only the top 6 drivers would go on to race at Daytona. The remaining 8 cars were returned to Porsche in Germany, where they were overhauled and modified with stiffer springs, more downforce, and more rearward brake bias to suit the nature of Daytona, particularly its high-speed banked sections. The IROC race at Daytona was purposely scheduled during Daytona Speed Weeks, the headline event of which was the Daytona 500. This was particularly convenient for NASCAR drivers who were racing in IROC since they'd already be there.
George Follmer takes a jump in the yellow car, and he moves immediately up in front of Mark Donohue.
That's the fourth part of this racetrack can take some advantage, but we're back in the leaders again with Mark and George driving around there as if they were brother and sister.
On lap 12 of the 25-lap race, George Follmer's transmission failed, and Mark Donohue drove to yet another IROC victory, this time in the orange car, and thus the Porsche era of IROC races ended. IROC would continue for more than 30 years, although always with American cars in subsequent years, initially Camaros, later on Dodges, and then Trans Ams. After the final 1974 race, this particular car was sold to one of the drivers who had done the shakedown on these cars before the IROC races, Al Holbert. He had previously raced an RSR in the US in 1973, and this became his 1974 car. He painted it dark blue and won at Road Atlanta in April, Lime Rock in May, and Mid-Ohio in June. At the Daytona finale in December, he got second overall in the car. And then at the end of the year, he crashed the car and put it on its roof, and the crash remained sat in Pennsylvania for decades. In 2008, it was finally restored to its IROC configuration with the livery that it wore when George Follmer scored the first of its 2 IROC victories. Its multiple IROC wins makes this one of the most significant of these cars that was built, second only to the orange car that won the championship at Daytona. Given the car's significance, interacting with it can cause the driver some apprehension. But anyone familiar with 911s of this era will find the car to be more familiar than unfamiliar. Originally, these cars had only driver's seats, but it is common to add a passenger seat, presumably to share the outrageous experience it provides with another person. The centerpiece of that experience is the engine. It explodes to life with an incredible racket. Although the car appears to have a muffler, it produces race car levels of exhaust noise. At idle, this is in the form of individual explosions out the rear twin exits, which transition into a wall of noise that seems to be composed of every possible frequency all at once. On the overrun, a guttural roar assaults everyone in earshot. Inside the car, the noise level is appreciably lower, although it is still very loud. The engine has sensational throttle response thanks to its mechanical fuel injection system, which uses individual throttle bodies with long intake trumpets and no air filters. There is probably a great deal of induction roar, but the exhaust is usually too loud to hear it. The power-to-weight ratio of the car is nearly identical to that of a new GT3 RS, and it feels like it. The car absolutely rips, and while the 10,000 RPM tachometer has no red line, Porsche recommended an 8,000 RPM limit. The race cars were placarded with a 7,700 RPM recommendation to encourage the racers to keep the engines together long enough to complete the races. Presumably, the helpful instructions to depress the clutch pedal to the floor for gear changes was included for the same reason. The clutch is a little aggressive, but still manageable for street use, while the gear change has a light, slightly vague feel with quick-acting synchromesh for normal driving. The steering is unassisted, of course, and surprisingly light given the huge front tires. The car's track and wide tires give it a sure-footedness which, combined with its compact dimensions, great visibility, and extremely high-fidelity throttle pedal, make it a confidence-inspiring car in all conditions. The brakes are carried over from the 917 and are tremendous, adding further to the sense of security, and overall the car does an exceptional job of feeling like a race car in all the ways the driver wants, yet still remaining totally usable on the road. Longtime Porsche enthusiasts will have seen photos or video of these cars for decades, but with only 15 made, seeing one in person is a rare treat, assuming you know what you're looking at. It does, in almost all respects, look like just another 911. In some ways it drives like one too, although in several others its brutality will feel entirely unfamiliar. The IROC RSR perfectly encapsulates the Porsche philosophy. A couple of decades of development here, a couple magical engineering feats there, and the car's capability is totally transformed while still feeling unequivocally like a 911. Even if you aren't a 911 enthusiast, however, this car is special because it is an artifact of a very particular moment. It was the only time a non-American car was used for the decades-long IROC series, and it played a central role in creating one-make racing. It also showcased the talent of Mark Donohue, who would lose his life barely 18 months after winning the IROC championship when he lost control of his Penske F1 car when a tire failed in practice at the 1975 Austrian Grand Prix. He was an exceptional driver with exceptional versatility. He won at Trans Am, NASCAR, the Indy 500, Can-Am, and of course IROC. Even the venue was special. Riverside International Raceway was one of the finest racetracks in America and was an IROC staple, hosting more of its races than any other venue over the decades. It was closed in 1989 when the land it was built on became too valuable and it was redeveloped into a shopping mall. All of this was the backdrop for the IROC RSR. Right place, right drivers, right time, right car. That car is one of the most exciting 911s of all time, totally at home on the racetrack, but also a complete blast as a road car.